And that's when I realized that it was easier for me to believe that my mother never loved me than it was to face the possibility that she did, but I just could never feel it. So today, Uranus finally moved out of Taurus officially after a 7-year stint that changed the game, brought, disruption, chaos, and really shook things up, really made the ground feel like it was forever shifting, right? And so like now, as it moves into Gemini, my goal is to really feel and trust the ground isn't shifting anymore. And like everything that I've learned, right, in that period of 7 years, the person that I've become, just embodying that and really stepping up into that. And it's funny because last night I saw this post that was like talking about this and was like, look back to the person you were in 2018. So, of course I went on my photos app on my phone and typed in 2018 to just, see. And I almost just said like, yeah, that's when things started to fall apart. But I mean, I really feel like my whole life, like I could say that about literally any age, like that's when things started to fall apart. Things have always been falling apart. Until I learned to stand in the rubble rather than just surrender and collapse under it. That's, when I reclaimed a lot of my agency and power. But 2018, I got married really, really young to my high school boyfriend. And, I really, really thought I would be with that kid forever. Well, like, I'm such a loyal person. Like, and 2018 was the year where, he was really deep in his alcoholism. And the dynamic between us was that I was not allowed to tell anyone. I was so young. I didn't question it. I was just so loyal. I was just like, okay, like, and I held that. I held caretaking him. I held the secret. I held just the torture. And I was so lonely. I was so just in agony, right? And of course, now looking back, I'm like, oh, there was so much codependency. But things got to a point in 2018 where two things happened. One, I got to the point where he got so bad and lied to my face in such a way where I was like, this illness is I can't do it anymore. I was pushed to a point that I never thought I would be, which is I told him, if you don't get sober, I'm going to divorce you. I was literally like 21 years old, okay? Like 21 years old. I said the words aloud, like I could be a divorce, like I could get divorced and I'm this young. Like it was like such a mind warp because like I had like, latched onto this family. Of course, like unconsciously, I love them and it was a real relationship with them. But like, where the fuck would I go? I was like 21 years old. I was in Utah, like I 2,000 miles away from any, like it was just, I wasn't ready. And of course, that revelation, like that being pushed to a point that I never thought I would get, which is, in my mind, I set a line in the sand of what I can no longer tolerate in the unknown. And I said, I'm willing to go there. But for me, what I did not realize was that setting that line and that boundary was me going into the unknown already. And, that was kind of always a point of contention between me and my husband, because what happened after that was he did get sober. I mean, it was like a little bit rocky for a couple weeks, but like he ended up getting sober. But for me, it felt too late. For me, it felt like the damage was done and I had already been pushed to a point where like I was done. And I had allowed myself to feel that and see that. And it was almost like I had reached that point of no return. And so it was like after that, my heart really wasn't in it anymore. And I don't know how to explain that, but like that was the beginning of Uranus, was like 2018. And of course, like when I was in that place and also very young, like I was very susceptible to other people giving me attention when, my ex-husband couldn't. And I was so lonely and I mistook, I can't even say I mistook it, but I did things that I never thought I would do. And I think that's what it is. I think like I was becoming a person in secret, in the subliminal, like nobody could see, but I was like becoming a person and doing things that I never thought I would do. And so like what, and this is not bad. I'm not saying like these are even like inherently bad or good things. I'm just like, I was growing as a person. You know, I wasn't the kid anymore that was like, I'll never do this. I'm going to be married to this. My high school boyfriend is going to be perfect, happily ever after the rest of my life. You know, I was like, oh no, like I'm a grown up now in grown up situations doing grown up things that I never thought I would, you know, be in. Of course, when I was a child, I was in grown up situations doing grown up things that I shouldn't have been doing either. And so what happened over the course of the next 7 years was eventually all of these things went on to the grand stage, right? They were no longer backstage, right? I could not do that anymore. I just couldn't. I couldn't betray myself and keep myself in the closet and keep myself hiding. It's almost just like it was another point of no return. It was like just a pressure cooker, and it was like, this has to come out. So it was about, let's see, 2018 to 2020. When did everything fall apart again? 2023? Yeah, 2023. So what is that? About 5 years later is when so it literally was like 5 years after that of my husband and I, you know, being together, moving out of the state, you know, continuing on with life until we ultimately separated and got divorced. I came out of the closet. I started having an affair with a woman. And of course, this time it was really, really different. Like I told him almost right away that I wanted space to see other people, because like I couldn't do it again. I was like, why are we doing this to each other? Our marriage at that point was so far gone, and neither of us knew how to say goodbye. Our main thing was that we were so safe and comfortable together. Our marriage was mostly like, I don't even want to say like, were we best friends? Yes, but I feel like it was almost more of like a sibling bond. It was like, he was like my brother. Like we really barely had sex, like, but again, like just so comfortable. And again, there's like nothing necessarily like inherently wrong with that dynamic, but for us, our soul contract together was truly, you know, can we learn to fly this nest? Can we learn that, like, yes, safety is important? And for me, especially going through what I went through, that was what I needed in order to get to the emotional place that I needed to be in order to leave. But ultimately, this lifetime for me was not about, you know, a marriage of safety to this person. It got to a point where neither of us were able to grow together. Neither of us. He wasn't doing what he had to be doing. I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. And it's just like, we ended up just like resenting each other. And of course now, you know, 3 years later, we have conversations. It's like, oh yeah, you know, like he's even been like, thank you. Like I had to be the one to do the hard thing. I had to play the villain, you know, whatever. But I did break free. I broke both of us free. And, you know, I look back at 2018, and that is kind of when that seed was planted of, maybe I won't be with this person forever. And I feel like now this notion of forever has really been called into question. You know, what does that even mean in terms of like relationships? I truly feel like every relationship I've been in, I've been like forever is in the front of my mind. And, you know, of course, parts of that, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But for me, when that came from an unhealed place of abandonment, right, and like wanting to hold on to something no matter how bad it got, because I just wanted something to last forever, can't come from that place, right? It can't come from an empty cup. And I have filled that cup, you know, I am filling it. I don't think it's necessarily a one and done task. You know, my life's work is born out of my abandonment wounds, and my abandonment wounds for my mother, and how that continuously informs the way that like I experience life and experience the world. And as I do the shadow work and like I've healed one layer, you know, a new experience is going to be brought to me, and it's like, okay, this is the next layer. And, you know, even just last night, because, you know, Uranus moving out of Taurus, I have an algol star, a fixed star placement, which, you know, is a familial curse in my family. My mother has it. And again, like, cycles are different than curses. Breaking generational cycles, like, we all kind of have that. Generational curses have a very different flavor, and typically you can see them in the astrology. So I did have like an astrology done of my chart, an astrology done of my mother's chart, which miraculously, like, I had her birth certificate because at one point I was trying to get citizenship with it. And the astrologer, my friend Jessica, she was like, yeah, y'all have a very, very poignant, severe, and very tragic curse and story in your maternal lineage. And I was like, yeah, I have felt haunted my whole life. And, my astrologer was like, Hummingbird, you are the final, like, this ends with you. So basically, like, if you cannot break this cycle, no more children will be born, right? The generation ends with you. Like, there's no more, like, because that's what happens typically with curses. They cannot withstand 7 generations. Even at that, it's like really stretched thin. And I did feel that. And if you even just look at my family and the amount of how small it is, and the amount of death and the way the deaths happened, and there's so few of us left, like, blood wise. I really do believe if I had not done this work, like, yeah, it's over. Like, it cannot continue. And so that is, to be a curse breaker, y'all, that's a whole different ball game. And I think that's something that has to be done on maybe a little bit more levels and a little bit deeper on each level. But it's been tough. And so my point was that, this astrology changing, Uranus moving out of this part of my chart, it passed over the final activation of this curse. And I have spent the last 5 months specifically intensely working on this curse on a very, like, spiritual and energetic level. Of course, my whole life, again, has been about this curse and breaking free from it. But now, of course, it is conscious. For a long time, it was just, I didn't know, I didn't have language, I didn't, I was just like, there was all of this pain and distance. And now, obviously, I know what's going on, which, it does help. But it's also like, what I was thinking about last night, it's like, okay, because my grandma, my adopted grandma, she called me and she said, Mia, I've had a revelation. And I can't tell you yet, but it's about you and your mother. She was best friends with my grandma and me and my mom. Like, she's just very deep in our family history. And I said, okay, you don't have to tell me. And of course, we talk for hours every day. So she ended up telling me. But she told me the story about her and her mother. And I don't want to tell it for her, but essentially, she had a very tortured relationship with her mother as well. And after her mother passed, her childhood friend said to her that one time her mom told her friend this: if I had known what Dell wanted, I would have given it to her in the womb. And my grandma went her whole life without knowing that, without feeling that, without understanding that, how much truly her mother loved her. And I feel like, and she said, I have to tell you that, because it's almost like she was now telling me, while my mother's still alive, what her friend had told her after her mother passed. And she called me, my grandma, and she said, there was one time I called your mother and she was just raving about you on the phone. She was so proud of you. So proud. She didn't talk about your other sibling. She was just so proud of you. You went to school to be a writer. When my grandma said that, I was like, I didn't believe her. I was like, I don't know this woman who would say she was proud of me to someone else. Who is she? I only know a woman who, I was the fuck up and my siblings could never do anything wrong. What do you mean she didn't talk about them? I don't have these stories. I didn't grow up with these stories. I didn't grow up with this feeling. And, you know, my grandma, she was like, yeah, I know. Me neither. But you need to know. You need to know how much your mom loves you. And so, like, what I realized in, like, reflecting after this conversation was, it is easier for me to believe a story of my mother who never loved her kid, my mother who never loved me, than it is for me to believe a story of a woman who loved me so deeply, but I never felt any of it. How can the brain make sense of that? You know, how can the brain make sense of my mother abandoned me and she loved me more than anyone else on this planet? There's nothing more sublime than that. There's no language for that. Do you know how much easier it would be for me to just say this woman was a cold, heartless, evil person with not an ounce of love in her? Now, does she have struggles connecting to her emotions and that love? Yes. Has she ever been able to communicate those things? No. But is it there? Yes. And I don't want that story. And I think, like, that's what I realized is, like, yes, I have pushed her away. I do keep a distance between us that I fill with a story of a woman who never loved me. But is that the truth? That's one truth. But the truth with a capital T, no, there's so much love there, and that is why it is this painful. There is so much love there, and that is why there has been such horrific just separation and torture and trauma between us. And I have spent a decade doing this work with healing my relationship with my mom, and it has gone through so many stages, right, of healing, going from, you know, being an adult that, like, constantly felt like I needed a mother that I never had, and, like, filling that void, and being at a point where I no longer need this woman. I can fulfill that need in myself. I can, you know, have that in the community around me. So then what do you want? What do you want from this woman? I don't know. But I do feel like, you know, my friend was like, my grandma was like, if I, for so long, I withheld my love for my mother as a form of revenge. And I didn't realize I was doing that, right? Like, these things are deeply unconscious. And, you know, my response was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't feel vengeful. And then I thought about it, and I thought, the reason I don't want to try is because for me to have any sort of relationship with my mother, it's going to be a shallow relationship, right? Like, there's not going to be depth to it. We would just have to talk about, like, I don't know, TJ Maxx or interior design or something like that. And if we just did that, there could be a connection, right? But it's almost like, because I want something deeper. Maybe that is what I want. I want a deep connection with my mother that I'm not going to get from her. And so for me, I like realized yesterday that was like, why should I call her up and try to have a conversation where she feels so good about it? And she's like, oh, this is like great. I'm like, you know, I'm talking to my kid and we're having such a good, fun conversation about, you know, the TJ Maxx candles. And I think, like, for me, it's like, why does she deserve to feel good about that? Why should she feel like, oh, okay, like, after everything I did to you, we can still be good, even though she's never once in her life taken accountability. She's never once apologized. She's not capable of doing that. And I have actually most people in my life tell me, stay away. Like, this is dark energy, like, don't go there. But I really do feel like that's not my task in life. I do feel like the rest of my life, at least the next 30 years, my mom's not going to be there for my last 30, so it is going to be about finding this middle path. And so like I was texting with my grandma, and she was like, I texted her, I was like, I'm having revelations, and she was like, did you write them down? And I was like, of course not, because that's what we always say to each other, because we're always like, did you write it down? Of course not. And she texted back, she was like, write it down. And like I felt it, and I was like, okay. So like I immediately went to my journal, and maybe I'll just read what I wrote. Wow, I can't believe that was zoomed in so intensely this whole time. Hopefully you could see my face. Okay. So this is what I wrote. I want to leave you in my past so badly. Once I was the mirror held up to a woman who could not bear to look at the reflection. And now she has become mine. And I don't want to look either. I want to leave this mirror to dust. Because somehow it is less painful to believe a story of a girl whose mother didn't love her. And the story of a girl whose mother loved her so deeply, but she never felt any of it, is just too much. I went looking for that love in all sorts of places, until I finally found it in myself. But now where does that leave us? Two mirrors, held up to each other. What if we shattered them? Whose reflection would we see? Or would I just see my own face in the woman who made me? Is a mother not a mirror in and of itself? Would I stop seeking her face in everyone I meet? Because it is easier to find my mother in a stranger than feel the stranger in her. Love is nothing simple, and it is all we have. That much is simple. I don't know what to do with the love I have for you, just like you do not know what to do with the love you have for me. But I do know that this love cannot be held or withheld. Maybe it simply means conjuring a different memory when I think of you. One where we're sitting in the car and I'm making you laugh so hard you pee your pants. The more I know myself, the less I know you. The more I've grown closer to myself, the more I've grown distant from you and the wound of us. But I am still here, and so are you. Is this where we write a new story? The one I have in my own head about you? I've written so many stories about horrible mothers, trying to make sense of you and me. I'm not sure I've ever written about a loving mother. Even that much sounds like a lie. But I'm not talking about this fantasy illusion of a good mother. I'm talking about a story of a 12-year-old girl who has never stood on a cliff edge wondering, why can't my mother love me? But maybe it's not a story about a mother who couldn't love a daughter at all. Maybe the real story is just about the girl. One who chose to believe she was unworthy of love. An unlovable girl who would ultimately need to learn to cultivate this love within herself. And her first lesson was handed by the womb. Because what would you say to the 4th grade science teacher who failed you after you just got back from a mission to the moon? Thank you. I showed you. Maybe you wouldn't go back to visit at all. Does anything matter really after all that time? Would your teacher be bitter, proud, chuckle to themselves? I guess in the end, it will go the way you want it to. We are always in more control than we want to believe. So what do you want, Mia? Because you've been to the moon and back, and Mom never left her hometown. Some people are so scared of knowing themselves. I don't know what to say, but I do know this. If I ever made it into space and I looked back down at the whole Earth, you would be the one I think of. I think the middle path is within me. Because it's almost like the outcome is not, the external relationship is not, going to change because, I can't say never because who knows, maybe my mother will choose to do that work, but she really has such intense astrology that it's so buried so deep in there that, she would have to do a lot of work that, I have not seen her be willing to do. But that is to say never about anybody. I don't really say that about anybody. But I just feel like the type of connection that I can have with her, that is here. Like that's fixed. I'm not sure that like that's changing, but the way that I feel about it, the way that like I interact or don't interact, the closeness and proximity in which I feel to it, like all of that is the middle path. I'm finally at a place in my life where I do not need her in any emotional, physical, financial like capacity. I can choose to truly like just completely walk away. I know that is not my task in life. I know that that would be the easiest option, because it really does, like I wrote here, she was my mirror. I was her mirror held up to her of everything, you know, more than my other siblings, because my siblings followed her path and I didn't. And like I represented to her everything she could never do for her own life and herself. And now I feel like she's a mirror for me of the person I was for so long, trying to get her to love me. And that person feels so foreign and cringy and painful for me to even feel into. But I think the more I separate myself from myself and that person that I was, that is never the task. I have to pull them closer. And I think I reject that part of myself because, you know, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to go there. I feel so secure in like who I am now. And maybe I feel ashamed or embarrassed or, you know, so insecure about who I was for such a long time, because it just doesn't feel like me. It feels like a completely different person. But that is the beauty of life. That is the evolution of life. That is, we are all, if you get the chance to become a completely different person, do you know what a gift that is? That we get to come here down on earth and evolve so much to that point. 2018, I was a housewife living in Utah, you know, living just a very small life and wanting so badly to please parents that abandoned me. Thinking I wanted to be a doctor to finally make them happy. And you know, dressing and being in a way that my mother would approve of, even if she wasn't there. And being so afraid of myself and so unsure of myself. And, you know, now I'm so unapologetically myself, that feeling into that tightness and that repression and that fear is so hard, but I can't be ashamed of them. I can't be embarrassed of them. I have to love them, because, you know, if they did not decide to go on this journey, I wouldn't know what it means to choose myself at the end of the day, and choose myself unapologetically, relentlessly, in the face, and fiercely and boldly. And yeah, I don't know what it's going to be moving forward with my mom, but I do know what's coming through is that this is my life's, like, this is what the next chapter of my life is going to be. The first 30 years was, you know, a lot of healing, a lot of individuating. And I feel like the next 30 is going to be figuring out what the middle path is. And the middle way is always within. So anyways, yeah, the last 7 years just reflecting on, and just Uranus and Taurus and the curse and everything. Like, today is a milestone. Let's see what my astrologer even use her language for it. April 26th is a milestone. Uranus enters Gemini, finally clearing your moon and Algol entirely. This marks the end of a survival-based emotional cycle. And I feel that. Yeah.